Well, Greek myth, Japanese folklore, vibrant colors, and a veiled sense of foreboding collide in the latest exhibit on display at the Plug-in Institute of Contemporary Art at the University of Winnipeg. Halcyon Kawasemi is a collaboration between artist Takashi Iwasaki and artist-designer Joe Kalturnyk. Both of them call Winnipeg home and aim to engage the community through the power of story, representation, and function with their works individually and collaboratively. Joe and Takashi join me now. Good morning.
Good morning.
Thanks so much for taking the time. Maybe, Joe, I'll start with you. For those who might not be familiar with this Greek myth that is embedded into this exhibit, the myth of Halcyon and Ceyx, maybe you can tell us a little bit about it and maybe what your sort of first interaction with that myth is before we get into the Japanese folklore that kind of moves alongside it in tandem.
Yeah, so I think we were talking about when we were sort of developing the idea of the show. There's an underlying tension, both joyous and, as you said, foreboding in a lot of the work that Takashi does. And it was sort of, I think it came to me was that there's Halcyon. When we say Halcyon days, it's almost like it's aimed at, there are better days ahead, but also we often use it as there was better days behind. So it plays with the temporal nature of that, and I find a lot of the work has both joy. There's always a sense of there's this void, there's this ominous void that sometimes creeps in some of the work, and we wanted to really showcase that, and then to tie in with the Japanese folklore, Kawasemi is kingfisher in Japanese, and Halcyon refers to kingfisher.
Wow, like there's so many sort of interactions between that sort of Greek story and the Japanese story. Maybe Takashi, you can talk a little bit about this image of Kawasemi and how you first interacted with that image of this kingfisher flying in this, as Joe was saying, this space that's sort of suspended in the future and in the past. This Halcyon that, regardless of whether it's in the past or present, it seems to be above our sort of current present day life.
Yeah, that was the Joe started telling me, and we decided to have a theme, right? So, and his idea of seeing my work as Halcyon and Kawasemi was really fitting to me. And I always work with positive, uplifting, and joyous atmosphere. That's the thing I would like to make with my work. So that was just really smooth transition from his mindset to my way of working, and just felt really natural to me. Yeah.
Yeah, but as Joe was mentioning there, also there is that sort of sense of foreboding, that sort of darkness that is maybe an interesting sort of undercurrent to this Halcyon. When you talk about that sort of uplifting nature of your work, Takashi, what's it like to then have to wrangle with this sort of nefarious sort of an underpinning that also is a part of the exhibit?
I think in contemporary arts, at least for the past decades, it's been probably the thing that, beauty is something low quality or something to be dismissed about, and people didn't probably take beauty and aesthetic quality of any art really seriously since the rise of conceptual art. And yeah, people probably think, oh, it's escapism from something real. But my take on that is there's always both things in life, something negative, something positive, and something in between. It's just that the change of perspective of acknowledging the negative things in life and in certain depictions of what I do, what I make. But I think pushing more of the volume of positive side as a little louder, if I can say that.
Yeah, sure. That you're actually able to lift the positive elements of life up very intentionally above this sort of negativity that, maybe not negativity, but like the darker elements of life that maybe can help to keep us grounded in something that's not going to aesthetically drag us too far away from real life and that sort of real understanding and reaction to art, perhaps. Joe, in addition to this sort of conceptual art that's on display in Halcyon Kawasemi, you're also the one who I understand has a big hand in the installation of that. How does that, like, where the layout of these works by Takashi in the Plugin Institute, how does that contribute to this sort of blending of the grounded with lifting people up with these two stories rendered in art?
Yeah, so the Kawasemi piece, which is the installation, is sort of a take on an earlier piece that Takashi and I worked on 3 years ago. So it's a reinterpretation that I kind of spearheaded this reinterpretation in the same spirit as what we did a couple years back. As far as a lot of the logistics were figured out in the previous iteration, but I pushed it a little bit more this time because it has a sense of floating, which gives it, again, it's a dark room, everything's under UV light, and so you have these glowing figures, and it's a kinetic piece, so it spins. But the most important part was that it's got this like big heavy mass that's sort of floating, suspended in this dark room, which kind of lends again to that foreboding, whether it's lifting up or whether it's sort of pushing down. Yeah, I mean, it was a furthering, I think. So a lot of the figurative themes are a take on Takashi's work and his themes, but also a lot of the color, the bright colors.
I love this idea that, like, you could go either way of saying, yeah, it's lifting up further into the Halcyon, or it's all about to come crashing down completely, and there's not much we can do to stop something like that from meeting that kind of end. Maybe I'll pose this question to the both of you. You mentioned, Joe, that this is a piece that is a continuation of this artistic dialogue that you and Takashi have been having. A lot has changed in the last 3 years, and some of it has maybe been an improvement. We're further removed from sort of the deepest days of public health lockdowns, for example. But there's been a lot of global upheaval in that time as well. What do you think that engaging with this image of Halcyon, with the folklore of the Kawasemi story, and the Greek myth of Alkyone and Sikhs, how do you think all of that translates in 2025 versus when you were first engaging with this idea 3 years ago?
Well, I think the world has always had these moments of clarity and darkness. As far as you look back, I think from my perspective, I think bringing a sense of joy to people, to work, to the viewer, is a respite to a lot of the negativity. I think it's way too easy to get bogged down by it, and it kind of feels defeating. So I think the act of doing sort of quite like the work that Takashi does, like vibrant, beautiful, uplifting, it still has its undertones, but I think it's really for the viewer to read into it. I think it's kind of needed right now. I think it's maybe a salve is a way to put it, but it's something I think we need to have something to look forward to.
Yeah. Look to that Halcyon in our own sort of way, whatever that might be in our lives. What about for you, Takashi? What does this sort of continuation of the work mean to you 3 years after its sort of initial iteration?
Yeah, I don't really see it as 3 years ago and just now. I look forward to seeing something in 10 years. That's what I usually think of. So something of unknown that's to come, or I might die before that happens. I never know. But I don't really think death as something negative unless I have a tragic death. Maybe it's dramatic and fantastic as it is. But I always think of that as, for the better of war or worse, usually history repeats. And you mentioned upheaval and difficult time, but that's had been, in Roman time and, before the recorded time too. It's been always difficult, but it just as a blessing, we are short-lived as one single human being, and no one has the complete record of how bad it was, and we tend to forget, which is a beautiful thing in a sense. So it's hard to say if it's always negative or positive, or everything is negative and positive, and same coin flipped on the other side, it's still the same coin. It's how you read it, I think. So I'm not really giving you the answer, but that's how I look at it. It's kind of beautiful either way.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's exactly your own perspective on it. So you're absolutely giving me the answer. And you're right. It's really interesting to contemplate history and who gets to write it, and then how that influences the image of Halcyon. Well, then the question becomes, who's Halcyon? Who gets to be suspended above that darkness, and who maybe didn't make it off the floor of the Plug-in Institute of Contemporary Art, for example. It leads quite well into this other question that I had as I sort of contemplate this journey. And maybe, Takashi, I'll throw this one to you, since you're thinking about the time in such an interesting way to start. How do you think this piece would change if you and Joe were to keep engaging with these stories, with the folklore, but also with this image of Halcyon in, let's say, 10 years?
10 years.
You probably just keep developing, and we've already been talking about. There's something quite interesting about scale in this piece, and how scale really shifts. How the more it engulfs people, the more it pulls people in. So playing with scale, playing with materiality, I think that was one thing I really wanted to push in this particular exhibition. Is we had come up with a really, I think, winning strategy on how to create this effect, and I wanted to play with different materials and see what they do, and how do you engage with narrative and image in different ways. So I think in 10 years, I think it could keep growing. It could keep adding to. It could be a additive piece that eventually becomes, the size of a full building, or yeah.
Yeah, that's what I think too. The plug-in space is wonderful as it is, but we always think of outside of the box as a space, given space. And I've been doing some public artworks in the larger scale, which can't fit in the space. And Joe often creates larger habitable space or usable space that's beyond the scope of this given gallery space. So we're wide. Our scope is pretty wide, and could be shallow sometimes, could be really deep. That's where we usually think about. Doesn't have to be one spot, but could be everywhere, anywhere.
This maybe is a philosophical question then, to maybe close our conversation, but do you think that you will ever fully arrive at a Halcyon between the two of you, or is this something that is elusive, that you're always going to be trying to chase with your expression?
I don't think I really want to arrive as an artist. I think at the moment you arrive, that's the end. You're done.
Yeah, it's like I always imagine in my deathbed, oh, I still had 50 more things I wanted to do, and the breath is taken. That's more of my ideal, I think, situation.
Well, in that case, happy continued search, and in the meantime, congratulations on Halcyon Kawasemi, which is on display at the Plug-in Institute for Contemporary Art at the University of Winnipeg until July the 26th. Joe Kalturnyk and Takashi Kawasemi. No, I almost called you Takashi Kawasemi. That's not right at all. Takashi Iwasaki, thank you so much, both of you, for joining us here on Classic 107.
Thank you.
Thank you.